Okay, let's call this meetings of the Citizens Advisory Committee to order. It is Wednesday, May 21st at 5:37. Ms. Hollywood, will you take roll call?
Ms. Lomas? Here. Ms. Weber? Here. And Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Moldaver?
Here.
Mr. Bullock?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins?
Here, there we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have approval of the minutes from our last meeting, April 23rd, 2014. Did everybody have a chance to look them over?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we accept the draft minutes of the meeting of April 3rd, 2014 as submitted.
Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed or abstain?
I'm going to abstain, although it looks like a really exciting meeting. I'm afraid I missed it.
All right, next, agenda adjustments. Are there any adjustments to the agenda that we should be aware of this evening?
None from staff.
Well, but George, I noticed that 4A, the Champagne Revel to welcome our new chair, has been stricken from the agenda. Is that related to our budget presentation to council on Monday, or, I mean,
No.
was that a bargaining chip?
Thank you for the sentiment. The public comment is next. Any members of the public want to? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 6, committee meeting and staff communications.
I just have a couple of things. We just wanted to make an announcement that Jim Heaton is our new temporary liaison from the Parks and Recreation Committee, and he will be permanent possibly, but he's here attending. And then also I wanted to invite everyone to a workshop. It's on Wednesday, May 28th. It's the City of Santa Barbara's Advisory Groups Workshop. At this workshop, you'll be able to meet the new city attorney, Ariel Colon is going to be there, and then you'll hear some information about the Brown Act and things of that nature. So that, again, is on Wednesday, May 28th from 4:30 to 6 o'clock in Faulkner Gallery. And that's at the library, if you guys aren't familiar with that. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Don't forget Allison's going away party is that same afternoon.
Okay, thank you for all that. Next, we will move on to our business items. First, we'll recognize Jill Murray on UCSB research on microbial source tracking in the Arroyo Burro watershed.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm just going to make a short introduction to the presentation, which will be delivered by Dr. Jared Irvin. I just wanted to give a brief background. Many of you know that we have worked with Dr. Holden at UCSB for about a decade now on microbial source tracking projects around Santa Barbara. At the early years, that was really trying to test out some brand new tools, perfect some brand new tools, bring even additional tools on board. We've done several projects in Mission and Upper Arroyo Burro watershed using those techniques, plus the canine source tracking study. We did Laguna watershed, and the microbial source tracking protocol development project, where we looked for the sewer exfiltration. All of those projects were funded with grants from either the State Water Board. We had funding from the Switzer Foundation and WRF, and also some funding from Measure B. And then this brand new project, the one that Dr. Irvin will talk about, is one that was also funded by the State Water Board's Clean Beaches Initiative Fund. But this project is a larger project called the Source Identification Protocol Project. It's statewide, and we were really lucky that that grant went straight to UCSB and some other universities, but we were able to act as stakeholders to Dr. Holden and really suggest that Arroyo Burro was, I think, a great watershed to go even a step further. And the reason why we suggested that is that we know we have solved any of the smoking gun human waste issues in that watershed, and yet we still continue to have some beach warnings. And so this seemed to be really a case where with these high levels of indicator bacteria, something else must be going on. And so we were really hopeful that they would select Arroyo Burro as one of the target beaches, and they did. And so you'll hear a great presentation from Jared Irvin, and it's going to, I don't want to steal all his thunder, but it will point to the role of dog waste in water quality. And so we're going to continue working. We'll take the results of the science that they've done and turn that into some messaging. And so Dr. Irvin and I have already been interviewed by City TV, and that'll be turned into a short segment on Inside Santa Barbara. And then there's a joint, it's a joint project on creating community-based social marketing, and it's part of our stormwater management program. And Liz Smith is taking the lead on that and working with other agencies. And so they'll use the science that you'll hear tonight to inform some of that message. And I think it just makes the message a lot stronger when we can say we have the science to back it up. And then a couple of other things coming in this area are that we have, Dr. Holden has submitted another grant to the Clean Beaches Initiative grant program, and it looks really promising that it will be funded. And this is a source tracking grant that is going to tackle some watersheds that have never been touched before, and that includes Goleta Slough and Ledbetter and Honda Creek that goes into Ledbetter and Sycamore Creek. And again, for Sycamore and Ledbetter, nothing has shouted out that we have any glaring problems there, but we really haven't gone in and looked the same way that we have with our other watersheds. So I'm really hopeful that those projects get finalized. And again, this is great because the grant goes straight to UCSB, and that really allows us to weigh in and really benefit from the results, but we're not spending the staff time on contracting and grant reporting, and it's really, really beneficial for the city to when UCSB can use our beaches and watersheds in their research. And then last, we have a relatively small project coming up with Dr. Holden to take a small number of samples in the Laguna watershed and just make sure that all of the work that has been done there has led to elimination or strong reduction in that human waste signal that we were seeing coming out of that watershed before all of the improvements have been made by the wastewater division. And so that'll be coming up soon. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Irvin.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Murray, for the introduction, and thank you all for having me. I'm going to be talking today about, as Jill said, about the work project I've been working on with a group of researchers at the Holden Lab for about the last 3 years, and that involves microbial source tracking at Arroyo Burro Beach here in Santa Barbara. So, as Jill said, Arroyo Burro's had a history of problems with fecal bacteria in the surf zone there. Of all the beaches that are monitored in Santa Barbara County over the past 5 or so years of data that we've looked at, it received the highest frequency of beach warnings. Heal the Bay comes out with an annual list of an actual annual report that outlines the cleanest beaches in the state of California as well as the dirtiest. And they have a list of the top 10 beach bummers that are the top 10 most contaminated beaches. And you can see here in my figure 2011, Arroyo Burro was number 7 on the list. It had been on the list before, and it regularly receives low or failing grades on their reports. And all of these beach warnings and grades are based on weekly sampling that's done by the County of Santa Barbara for these fecal indicator bacteria. So what really are the fecal indicator bacteria? These are bacteria that are commonly found in human and animal feces at very high concentrations, and they've been linked to increased risk of illness for people recreating in waters with those bacteria. They're great because they're easy and inexpensive to measure. You can see that tray on the right side there is one of the tests that we use where you just count up the colored wells and you can get an idea of the concentration of these bacteria in your sample. Unfortunately, they take 24 hours in order to get those results back, and they don't give you any indication of what the source of that fecal contamination is. They can also come from natural sources in the environment. So They give you a good indication that there's a problem in your watershed or at your beach, but you need other tools to further that. So the pie chart down there shows a hypothetical water sample with several different sources in it, and what with the fecal indicator bacteria, you just get an idea of the total number of bacteria. You can't tell if those came from the birds, the cows there, or the people. So what we use is a tool called microbial source tracking. And the key part of the microbial source tracking method is that we use DNA markers, as we call them, to detect bacteria that are specific to different animal sources. So in our pie chart down there at the bottom again, we're able to test separately for the bacterial fecal DNA of the gulls, of the cows, and of the people, and then quantify each of those separately. So we can tell what the source is. And that's one of the two main questions we're able to answer with microbial source tracking is what is the source of contamination? Is it humans, birds, dogs, or other animals? And then the second question we try to answer is where is that contamination coming from? We can then track those markers back as concentrations get higher to the source of those bacteria. And knowing the source and where the source is located, we can then hopefully lead to the removal of that source, to some management action that actually cleans that source up or ceases it from contaminating the water. So for Arroyo Burro Beach and the Arroyo Burro watershed, this is kind of our large overview of the study that we did. We started out actually back in 2011 with a thorough analysis of all the historical data for the indicator bacteria, as well as other water quality data and reports that had been done on the watershed. Did some watershed reconnaissance that included meeting with people with knowledge of the watershed from the city and the county, as well as others, and then actually going out and walking all the creeks, taking some preliminary samples. And what this allowed us to do was to narrow down a list of what sources we thought were the most likely to be impacting Arroyo Burro Beach, and then develop hypotheses on how those sources were impacting the water quality that we could test. So in 2012, we started the Real Microbial Source Tracking field study, and we started out with kind of a larger watershed-wide focus. We were looking at samples that we took throughout the surf zone and across the beach, as well as through the lagoon, and then in that map you can see where we went upstream. The numbered and lettered circles are our sampling locations throughout the watershed. We went up to about where 101 is there along the creeks. And we sampled for 10 weeks over the summer of 2012. We then looked at all our data, analyzed it, and for 2013 we came back and did some further sampling in a more targeted manner. We were able to focus in then our second year of sampling on areas where we saw potential sources and really get more where there was the need for more information to narrow down. Again, we did 10 weeks of sampling, and we did sampling at both creek and beach locations. So what sources were we investigating? At the beach, we were interested in anything. Humans were a priority throughout, even though, as Dr. Murray said, major human sources had been removed. Human sources of fecal contamination carry the highest risk of illness, so that was still a priority for us to look, did we see any human contamination still present? So at the beach, there was humans, birds and dogs, of course. Also, we looked at the sand and the wrack or kelp as a potential place where these bacteria could be harbored and then released into the surf. In the lagoon, humans, birds, and dogs. And then along the upstream creeks, again, humans as well as the dogs, and wild canines such as coyotes and fox that are living in the area. And then horses potentially from the Earl Warren Showgrounds along upstream Las Positas Creek. And just a note, when I'm saying human sources, that could be direct human, such as homeless encampments, or leaking sanitary sewers, failing septic systems. All those could be examples of human sources of contamination. So the results of that almost 3 years of research, first of all, for the fecal indicator bacteria, we saw a very strong relationship between when water from the Arroyo Burro Lagoon was flowing into the surf zone and the levels of those bacteria. And this was something that the Creeks Division had seen based on historical data. But it was very nice to be able to show this convincingly with our data, that when that lagoon breached and opened up, all those bacteria from the lagoon were released into the surf zone, and that's really what was the primary driver of bacteria levels in the surf, at least during our sampling. For the human bacterial markers we were looking at. We did see very low levels, kind of sporadic hits in a couple of areas, both in the surf zone and along upstream Arroyo Burro Creek, and I should also mention Las Positas Creek, which is where we actually found evidence of homeless encampment. There was a few homeless people living along upper Las Positas Creek. We were able to measure the human markers just downstream from them, and then got in contact with the city to clean out that area. So that was actually a successful use of the human markers. And although we measured them just downstream from there, they didn't travel all the way down to the lagoon and into the surf zone. So it didn't appear that contamination was affecting downstream water quality. We did some further sampling at the beach, looking at groundwater along, particularly to the west of the beach, because we had seen those human fecal bacteria in the surf zone there. But we did not see any evidence that input was from the groundwater on that west side of the beach, at least in the areas that we sampled. For the animal markers, the gull bacteria marker was common throughout the surf zone, as you might expect, as well as in the lagoon, where the gulls and other birds are common. But we did not see any relationship with those bacteria and the indicator bacteria. So it didn't appear that the gulls were causing the elevated levels of the fecal indicator bacteria. The dogs, on the other hand, we found dog fecal bacteria in the surf zone as well as in the lagoon, and also along upstream creeks in several locations. And these we did see a relationship between the dog bacteria and the fecal indicator bacteria. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. Just to note that we didn't see any of the horse marker that we looked for in downstream Las Positas Creek that's directly downstream from the Irwarren Showgrounds. So more on our results from the dog marker, which was very interesting to us. So we were looking for dog fecal contamination because Arroyo Burro is a dog park, dog beach where people bring their dogs and they run around on the beach. We expected to see some level of input from those dogs at the beach, and we did see that. Even when the lagoon was completely closed off, the sand was bermed up, we did see some dog marker in the surf zone. That direct input didn't appear to directly cause increased FIB levels. What we saw that was really interesting was a significant amount of the dog marker we were measuring was also flowing out from the lagoon with the indicator bacteria. And when we tracked it up through the lagoon, we saw that there was significant levels of the dog marker coming in from lower Arroyo Burro Creek, dumping into the upper part of the lagoon. And this was really a surprise to us. We did not expect the dog bacteria to be coming in that area. So we had the dog fecal bacteria coming into the lagoon and exiting the lagoon. One thing that we're still working on, and we're actually starting a project at Arroyo Burro to investigate, is what's really happening with the bacterial levels when they're in the lagoon. We see them entering and we see them exiting, but is it that they're able to persist and possibly even grow in the lagoon, or is it that they degrade rather quickly and then there's other inputs? You know, we see dogs swimming around in the lower lagoon, dogs at the beach. So that's something that we're still actually investigating, how those travel over time through the lagoon and into the surf zone. So what is the real impact of these dog feces? One question that we wanted to ask to kind of put things in perspective was how much of fresh dog feces would it take to get the levels of dog bacteria that we're measuring in that creek? And so we've measured several dog fecal samples, fresh samples in the lab, and so we can make that kind of a theoretical calculation, and it came out to about 25 grams per day of dog waste into the creek would cause those levels. And that's an amazingly small amount of dog feces. That's about the amount that a single small dog generates in a single fecal event, really. So it's just the impact, because bacteria levels are so high in the feces, the impact can be really great. And potentially that in the creek could then, if those bacteria are persisting along with the indicator bacteria, that could be affecting not only the creek but also the lagoon and then the surf zone, as we were seeing. So as I said, we observed dog fecal sources in that downstream creek area as well as directly at the beach. There could also be sources directly into the lagoon with people walking their dogs around the lagoon and also dogs swimming in the lagoon. And we were also curious, we did some testing on wild canine feces, both fox and coyote, and those did show up as dogs, basically the same as dogs with our dog marker. It wasn't specific enough to be able to tell the difference between the wild canines and domestic dogs. So what we were able to do to kind of further that second year, further test our hypothesis that domestic dogs along Lower Arroyo Creek were affecting water quality was we teamed up with the Creeks Division. They led a door-to-door education program last summer, and they went to homes, residences along Lower Arroyo Creek and Las Positas Creek, where we had seen the dog marker. And then we coordinated our sampling with their education program so that we took samples before the program and then just after the program to see if we could see an impact on bacteria levels in the creek. And very nicely, we got a significant reduction at the downstream end of Arroyo Creek just before it enters the lagoon. That's where site 11 is. You can see in that figure there's a nice drop at that site from before to after, and that's the dog marker concentration. So our overall conclusions from this study, one was that Arroyo Burro Lagoon is really playing a key role in the release of both the fecal indicator bacteria as well as the dog markers into the surf zone. And then that education program really showed that those domestic dogs at residences along the creeks can have a large impact on the surface water quality in the creek as well as potentially the lagoon and surf zone. And then more generally, that this small education program had an impact, so it suggests that expanding the education to along throughout the watershed, as well as expanding further education around the lagoon and further enforcement at the beach could really have a larger impact on the bacterial levels at Arroyo Burro Beach. And finally, the cooperation with our local stakeholders, so particularly the Creeks Division at Santa Barbara, was really essential in the success of this project. So I just want to thank all my colleagues at the Holden Labs, particularly Dr. Trish Holden and Lori Van de Werforst for their support on the project, our local and state stakeholders, the City Creeks Division, County Environmental Health and Project Clean Water, as well as Heal the Ocean, and the Clean Beach Task Force and Control Water Board. As Jill mentioned, this was part of a larger project looking at several different beaches and testing these methods in the field. We are collaborators at Stanford, UCLA, and the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project. And you can see the principal investigators there. So I thank them and all their groups for their help. And the funding for this project is from California Proposition 84 and the Clean Beaches Initiative grant program. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Irwin. Appreciate the presentation. Do we have any questions or discussion?
I have one question for you. When you normally look at, you said livestock, and you showed a photo or a drawing of a cow. Is that what you usually look for, or do you look for horses? Because I am not aware of any cattle here at all in the Santa Barbara area. They're all horses.
Yeah, so we didn't.
Or is it lumped together?
Cows or cattle and cows didn't come up as one of, from our background research as one of the likely sources. But horses did because of the Earl Warren Showgrounds. In many watersheds in California, cattle can be a major input. Yeah.
But you have to look specifically to find out between horses and cattle. There's not the same markers, are there?
Oh yeah, there are separate markers for cows, and another part of the study was a large method evaluation. So we looked at many different methods for both for human and animal markers, and some of those were cow specific. There's pigs, horses, any of the common animals that you'd expect to be contaminating watersheds. These methods have generally been developed for, so there are separate markers for those, and there is some that are more general. There's some ruminant ones that would capture more different animals at the same time. So yeah, yes.
You normally look for horses around here in this study, or was this a specific test because you were working downstream from Earl Warren?
Yeah, we specifically chose that because it was downstream from Earl Warren. I mean, if there had been a lot, I know Hope Ranch area, there's horses in that area, so maybe if we had been working, that's just outside of our watershed, but if we'd been working downstream from there, we may have also looked for it there, but that was specifically because of the Earl Warren Showgrounds.
And just to let you know, there are a lot of horses on the other side of Cathedral Oaks that may be bringing contaminants down.
Right, and
quite a few.
Right, so the reason we only went up to about the 101 was because during the summer the creek is actually dry above that. Certainly during the winter or wet weather, then other type sources could come into play.
All right, thank you.
I want to thank you and Dr. Holden for not only an excellent report, but a lot of detailed research. And it's really fascinating how just one or two dogs that weren't well managed can actually lift up the indicator levels. Since the meeting started, we're very fortunate that our Councilman Greg Hart has joined us. And I don't know whether Greg was on the council at the time, but I remember sitting in this chamber when the city leaders of Dogpack promised the mayor and the council and the city administrator that if Arroyo Burro Beach was made an open beach for dogs, that they would educate their members and the public at large so well that these kind of indicator readings would be highly improbable. So I was wondering, as part of your community outreach research with Dr. Murray and our public affairs people, have you had a chance to interact with the former or current officers of Dogpack? I'm sure they're eager to volunteer to walk door to door through the Las Positas Valley and the West Mesa, re-educating all pet owners.
Yeah, we at the Holden Lab, we have not contacted anyone outside of the Creeks Division.
Mr. Moldaver, that's a great suggestion, and no, we haven't contacted Dogpack yet. That's a great idea.
I was going to borrow a favorite phrase of my colleague, Mr. Moldaver's, and ask if for those watching at home or for those dog owners like myself on the committee, if you give us the Cliff's Notes of the educational presentation, what suggestions do you have?
I think most people do the right thing most of the time. It's scoop it into a bag and throw it away right away. Don't set the bag aside thinking you might get it later. I was just at the Watershed Resource Center, and they were talking about the school groups that go out to Arroyo Burro and do a trash pickup and count as part of their educational field trips. And on one group of very young kids found 62 bags of dog waste on the beach. So that's one thing. And now we know it just takes one. You know, and if there are how many dogs go down to Arroyo Burro per day and walk along the lagoon or are being walked in up higher in the watershed, and if it's just, you know, one, if you're doing it just once a year, someone else is doing it the next day. Just don't even allow yourself to slip that one time. I also think that from talking to some of the lifeguards, it sounds like a lot of dogs, they really look forward to their walk down in Arroyo Burro. They hop right out of the car and run into that lower lagoon area, and some of them just have a sip of that salt water and then use the facilities, so to speak. If you know your dog has that pattern, try and break it. Try and have them go at home before you go to the beach or whatever you can do. It's just, I do want to say that from what we know, from what science tells us, we're not catching any diseases from dog waste. If we were, we would hear when we took a sick dog to the vet, you know, you really need to protect yourself. These germs are very contagious, and that really isn't what happens. But no one wants to swim around in a lot of dog waste. We don't want to see beach warnings posted. And if the dog waste is contributing to a lot of fecal indicator bacteria, that's going to mask the use of that tool to show us when there really would be some kind of human waste problem.
Thank you.
Dr. Irvin, thank you for the presentation. It was great. Do you think you can go into a little bit more detail about the low levels of human marker found in the surf zone? I saw that there was a little bit of a bullet point, right, on the MST results slide.
So as I said, human was still a priority that we wanted to see if you could still measure it. So in the surf zone, the first year we did see this is. So with these quantitative assays, you normally get a number of bacteria per volume of water sample, and but if that reading is too low, there's also what we call detected but not quantifiable, and that's basically what we've been reading in the surf zone. Is it's so low that it's there, but we can't even quantify it. So it's very low, and it was about, I want to say about 20% of the surf zone samples that we took that first year. We went back the second year, took some further surf zone samples as well as those groundwater samples, because we were hypothesizing that potentially groundwater from Hope Ranch area could be contaminated with human waste. And we didn't see anything in the groundwater in the samples that we took, but we did again see low-level hits in the surf zone. And we actually confirmed those hits with a second human marker. There's actually 2 markers that we use that target different parts of DNA. And so when you see it with the second one, again, it kind of added confidence that you're actually seeing human waste and not some cross-reaction with another animal or something. So from what we've seen, there is a low level of human waste there in the surf zone, but it's too low for us to really. It's certainly not contributing to the FIB, the indicator bacteria that are measuring in the surf zone. As to what the source is, it was beginning to get outside of our scope of Arroyo Burro as we were going off to the west and up coast. And as to the source of that, at this point, we don't know.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any further discussion? All right. Yes.
From your map pointing to potential domestic or wild canine sources, have you talked with the staff about whether there are enough locations along the lagoon and the part of the creek to the north of Cliff Drive where we might want to have things for the plastic bags and mitts? Because it's possible that people are walking their dogs there and there isn't something handy, and the dog, as Dr. Murray said, gotta go, you gotta go, and so, and there's nothing there, and they don't want to walk all the way down to the parking lot and all the way back.
Well, I think we're just starting to get these results from UCSB and just starting to feed them into the channel for management actions, and that's a good one to look at. We'll be certain to do that.
And I did have one unrelated thing. The detail and scope of your study is very impressive, but as we all know, last year was a dry year, and this is one of the driest years since 1900. And so when hopefully this fall and winter we get to a wetter year, is there going to be money available from the state grant to redo some of the tests when there's a higher volume or higher speed or higher number of storm events going into the lagoon and down the creek into the surf zone? Because sometimes you have what looks like really, really impressive data points, but it's a very anomalous season to be counting, and then you get into a more normal pattern and the results either go way up or way down.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we've really thought about that in moving forward and how to do some of our future sampling. The short answer is no, this particular grant doesn't have any additional funding for that. Auxiliary is that the Clean Beaches Initiative Task Force has not wanted to fund research on wet weather, and I have really pushed for them to do that, especially because there are always some storms during our AB 411 season, which is April 1st to October 31st. But even if there weren't, we need to know there are so many indicator bacteria coming out of the creeks during wet weather. I do not think they are human waste related, but we need to be able to rule that out. And I think there is a little bit of the, I think there will be some allowance for some wet weather sampling in some of the future projects. And there's actually an RFP open right now from a different funding source, and I was going to tackle wet weather on that one. A third point is that sometimes the drought and low flow can actually help find problems because things become more concentrated, because your clean background is reduced, and so your more contaminated signal can stand out more.
And we did do this sampling over 2 years, so it's not. I mean, 1 year could be very different, but that does give us a better feel for what's happening.
No, not you. Mr. Bullock.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm the lodging industry representative on this group, and so I'd like to thank you for studying one of the Santa Barbara's best beaches. So Arroyo Burro was on the top 10 bummer beaches from Gila Bay for a few years in a row, and it says F grades in 4 of the last 6 annual beach report cards, which is not great. If that gets out. So, George, I'm not sure if you would know, or Jill, but what are the plans from the Creeks Department to get us off that list permanently? I mean, what can be done?
Exactly what you're hearing tonight is understanding where those FIB are coming from. The beach warning, the grades are based on the grades are based on beach warnings and indicator bacteria. If we do not understand where the indicator bacteria are coming from, we cannot reduce their sources. And I think it needs to be said that it looks like the dog marker is correlated with the FIB signal at times, but when they saw the dog marker drop, they didn't see the FIB drop right away. So we don't know, even if we clean up every single drop of dog waste getting into that lagoon, we still might have indicator bacteria that are completely harmless but growing in there and setting off the beach warnings. And that's a problem that's recognized at a national level. That's why the EPA is trying to push forward for new criteria. So we'll just continue to try to understand what is going on in that lagoon that allows such high indicator bacteria numbers to persist.
So if I understood correctly, one small dog's waste per day is what's creating this problem. So that's not really all that much going into the area. And for us to be on this list and that's the only cause, that somehow doesn't seem to correlate knowing what happens in other beach towns around the state.
So yeah, the calculation, that's really just a theoretical calculation to put things in perspective. That calculation of 25 grams per day really assumes it's fresh dog feces going directly into that creek and that there's no aging or degrading of those bacteria as they're traveling through. And that's, none of those things are actually the case. It would take, well, it's really unknown. I mean, and that's why our future research is focusing in on the lagoon to really determine what does happen when that dog waste goes in, gets into the lagoon. So, it may be that it's many more people that are, not necessarily putting their waste directly into the creek, but it's migrating in there somehow.
I think
Please.
I think if you go back to the beach bummer list, and I hope I'm not wrong on this, but a lot of the consistent beach bummers are places that have a pretty good sized creek that has a coastal lagoon that actually is, there's enough flow that it does stay open quite a bit during the summer. The years when Arroyo Burro Lagoon is closed all summer, we tend to have many fewer beach warnings, and those are the years we don't make it on the list.
So would it be an appropriate suggestion to ask that City Council bans dogs from the beach like there are on other city beaches?
I think it's far too early to begin that discussion.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things here was that what we saw was dogs directly at the beach didn't appear to be the biggest source of the dog bacteria. So actually, even if you took the dogs off the beach and around the lagoon, you'd still have the dog waste getting in from the creeks. And that's something that's interesting, not just at this beach, but at beaches across California. We were looking at this beach because it's a dog beach, but even beaches without dogs at them may have sources of dog bacteria coming from upstream that aren't being considered currently.
A couple of follow-up questions. Then, what is the geographic scope of the Gila Bay study? Is that nationwide, statewide?
Gila Bay does all of California as well as some, and they're just compiling the indicator bacteria data from the agencies that take it. But all of California, all the beaches that are monitoring California, they also do Oregon and Washington now.
Is it just based on FIB data, or?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I learned a new term, fecal event. Moving on to the second of our two business items this evening, we have a status report on the Creeks Division Clean Water Business Program and Business Assistance Program. Joining us to give that is Water Resources Specialist Jim Rumbley.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Jim.
So the Clean Water Business Program was created in 2005, and this was to recognize and reward businesses that will comply with the city's water pollution regulations. Currently within the city, we have 139 businesses that are certified, and each year we try to certify at least 20 new businesses. 2004 was the first year that we were certifying businesses, and we started just with automotive repair shops because we thought that they had the potential to have the biggest impact on water quality. In 2006, the program was expanded to include restaurants, and then mobile businesses, mobile washing businesses were included in 2008, and most recently, we've added construction contractors to this list. Currently, we have 92 restaurants that are certified. Pollutants of concern from restaurants include trash, grease, solvents, soaps, and detergents. Whenever we're considering certifying a restaurant, we have an inspection at the business, and we have a checklist that we go over. And there's certain items that we require answers to before we would determine that they're eligible for certification. For restaurants, this includes interior floor cleanup. How do they clean their floors? Do they mop and then discharge the water outside, or do they put it in a mop sink? Mat washing. Again, do they wash their mats outside, or do they have a mop sink where they can do that washing? For outdoor dining and patio cleanup, do they hose down their patios? Do they sweep? Do they mop? What do they do with the wash water? Do they capture it? What's their trash area look like? Do they wash down their trash area? Do they have a sewer drain and a covered trash area? Does the restaurant have fry oil? And what do they do with their fry oil? Do they recycle it? Do they store it outside? Is there secondary containment? What does their parking area look like? Do they hose down their parking lot? Do they sweep it? For automotive businesses, we have 30 currently certified within the city. And pollutants of concern for these businesses include hydrocarbons, solvents, soaps, and detergents. For automotive business inspections, we talk about vehicle and equipment fueling. Are they fueling on site? Do they wash cars? A lot of automotive businesses will wash your car before they return it to you. Do they capture the water if they wash the cars? Where do they store their liquids? Many automotive businesses will change oil and keep used oil on site. Do they keep that oil inside, or do they keep it outside? And do they have secondary containment? Are they performing any work outside? What would they do if there's some type of spill and they're doing work outside? Are they prepared to clean that up? And also, if they have a parking area and storage area, how are they cleaning that area up? Do they use wash water, and are they capturing that wash water, keeping it out of the storm drain system? For the mobile business sector, we have 16 businesses that are currently certified, and pollutants that we're concerned about here are sediment, metals, soaps, and hydrocarbons. When we speak with mobile business owners, we want to know about what type of soaps they're using. Are they using biodegradable soaps? When they're washing cars, are they capturing that wash water? And what do they do with that wash water once they capture it? Are they putting it in the landscaping? Or are they taking it with them to deposit at home in the sewer system? And when they wash, do they protect the storm drain? Do they have the equipment they need to block off a storm drain, or put a block down in the gutter to capture that water? And the last sector that we're currently certifying businesses in is the construction contractor segment. Currently, we only have one contractor that's certified. It's our newest certification type. We are planning to send out a postcard to the 1,000 plus contractors in the city that have a business license, and the postcard will tell them about the benefits of certification and let them know that this program is available to them. And with this new sector, our goal is to prevent all of the illicit discharges coming from construction sites, but especially sediment discharges during rain events. For construction contractor inspections, we're interested in spill prevention and how they would clean it up. Are they prepared for any type of spill? And for wet weather erosion control, what do they do when it's rain's expected? How do they tidy up the site to make sure they're treating or controlling sediment as much as possible? When they're having materials delivered, such as a concrete truck, are they able to provide a washout area for that concrete truck? Or if the concrete contractor wants to wash down their equipment after the delivery's made, do they have the capability to clean up and capture that water? And if they're storing materials on site, are they covering them up before the rains? And just in general, what are their washing practices? If they're doing dust control and using water, are they making sure that none of that water's running off the site? We have several outreach methods to try to increase the number of businesses that are currently certified or that can potentially be certified. I mentioned postcards. At each event, we also have a rack in case we come across a business owner that we can hand out flyers from. Enforcement calls are also a source of new businesses becoming certified. We might go out on an enforcement call and encounter someone that needs a better solution on how to capture their wash water, and we can provide that through the certification program. Historically, the best method of getting new businesses to participate has been simply cold calling, just showing up and asking to speak to a business owner or manager and telling them about the program and seeing if we can do an inspection right then and there to get them certified. Periodically, we also do advertisements in the Independent and Food and Home to talk about the program and let people know it's available. Several benefits to becoming a certified business. Each business gets a decal they can put in their window to show everyone that they're a certified clean water business. Businesses also get a certificate signed by the mayor, and they get free advertising. Every quarter, we announce all of the new businesses that have been certified in the Independent and also Food and Home. And then once a year, we do a full-page ad in the Independent with all the businesses thanking them for participating. And once a business becomes certified, they are eligible for the Business Assistance Program. This is a program that provides free products to help businesses comply with water pollution regulations. If we go to a business and we find that they just need that wet dry vacuum because they don't have a mop sink and they want to do some washing outside, we can provide that for them. And the maximum per business for the lifetime of the business is $1,000. The most common products that we provide are storm drain covers, wet dry vacuums, and vacuum dikes. And if you're not familiar with the vacuum dike product, what that is, it's a long strip of plastic about 5 feet, and you can place that in front of a storm drain or in a parking lot, and it allows the water to pool up. And you can connect a wet dry vacuum to the back of it, and it'll automatically suck the water up. In order to be eligible for the Business Assistance Program, you must have a business license, and you must have operated for at least 1 year, and there must be a demonstrated need for the products. Last year, we surveyed about 600 city residents in a public opinion survey, and some of the questions that were asked involve the Clean Water Business Program. And we found that 29% of all respondents reported seeing a sticker or certificate for a clean water business in a window or on a wall. And this is up from 16% from the last time we did the survey in 2008. And also we found that 71% of the people we surveyed stated that they were more likely to patronize a clean water certified business than one that wasn't. For fiscal year 2014, We have $28,000 allocated for these two programs. And these costs, or this money is available for advertising, mailing postcards, purchasing equipment, printing certificates, and decals. If anyone watching this program is interested in certification, it takes about 15 minutes to go over the checklist that we've talked about. And we always meet at the business so we can see the workflow. If anyone's interested, they can give me a call at 897-1910. That's my direct line. Or you could send me an email at jrumbly@santabarbaraca.gov to schedule a meeting. Does anybody have any questions about the programs?
We have the cost for fiscal year 2014. Do you have any idea how much the business certification program saves the city?
How much it saves the city?
Yeah.
I don't really have an idea about that. I mean, you have some type of things in mind where they might?
No, just wondering. Cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah, I don't really have a good feel for that.
Any other questions?
Thanks for your presentation, Jim. So if a consumer would like to go and pick out one of these green certified businesses, where would they go to find the list?
There's a list on the Creeks Division's webpage. All of the businesses are listed on there, and there's contact information for each business on there as well.
Any other questions? Discussion?
I was going to follow up on Paul's question. A lot of your presentation is kind of conventional or old media, postcards, phone calls, knocking on the front door when they open up for business and saying hi. In terms of social media, which I know a lot of the contractors and restaurants and most of the auto shops are using, rules, objectives, basic information that's available on our website and our Facebook location. So if someone wants to interact, or get up to speed on what the city expects without shooting an email or making a phone call, that's readily available.
Absolutely, yeah. Our outreach coordinator monitors the Facebook account for the Creeks Division probably every day, and she's very active in responding to inquiries that she receives.
And that's the other bookend. I know there are people watching at home. This is one of the highest rated programs in its time slot in the Tri-Counties. If someone sees a water or pollution release during business hours and they have specific information, what number or email address or a text thing can they use to report it? And would they report it to the Creeks Division, or would they call,
Yeah, absolutely. They can definitely call the Creeks Division.
And what number would they call to report?
The enforcement hotline is 897-2688, and that's also my direct line. So usually during business hours, we really try to answer that as soon as possible. But also we do have the capability to report polluted discharges that are observed through the website. There's a form. You can remain anonymous. We take anonymous complaints. You can even send a picture if you get it. And that's been available for a few months now, and we're starting to get more and more reports that way.
To follow up on Mr. Moldaver's comment about social media, do we have this decal available to give to the businesses who are certified so they can post it on their social media sites?
Yeah, we do. We have a PDF